all for coming. This is our second day of our workshop, and our first speaker is Professor Dragana Dimitrijević. She's teaching at the Department of Classics, and she's going to go a bit further in the past than what we are used to. We usually go and talk about late antiquity, but Dragana is going to talk about Cicero. The floor is yours, Dragana.
Thank you. Now, first I wanted to ask you, how did you sleep last night? Not bad? Can't complain, or?
I had a
not so great. Me too, because of this presentation. Okay. Now, our topic is dreams and predicting the future in Cicero's De Divinatione. And my first thought about this topic was, does dreaming have a meaning, actually? Because we spend some time dreaming every or almost every night, but may not remember most of our dreams, and their exact purpose is still unknown. Have you ever had a dream that seemed to predict the future? No?
Yes.
Yes? Many times?
Actually, a specific thing happened yesterday that I had a deja vu, and I had a dream that I recollect very well about the topics that I heard in the meeting when the last gentleman was presenting yesterday, so that was a coincidence. That seems like an appropriate thing to mention right now. But yeah, those things happen.
Yeah, to me also. So now a little bit about experimental research in dreaming. The first statistical results about dreaming were published in 19th century, and according to our days psychological studies, dream content has some precise phenomenological characteristics, as you may see this on your slide. First is visual imagery occurs more frequently in dreams than imagery of other senses, audition, touch, taste. So visual moment is the most important. Second, the dream drama is mostly lived by the dreamer from a first-person perspective. Next, some elements of real-life events previously experienced by the dreamer often contribute to the scene of the dream. Most often, the dream sequence is not within the dreamer's voluntary control. The dreamer may be convinced during the dream that the dream story is real. And the dream report is often full of people interacting with each other. So, as I said, dreaming was first investigated on experimental level in the 19th century. Calkins published the first statistical results about dreaming and argued that some aspects of dream content could be quantified. Later, questionnaires and automatic analysis of the lexical content of dream reports allowed psychologists to show the dream content has some precise phenomenological characteristics, and those are these characteristics. Substantial variability of content exists, however, among the same individual dreams, as you know, and among the dreams of different individuals. Further, psychological studies have shown that many internal and external parameters can influence dream content, as you know. For example, males report more aggression and violence in their dreams than do females. For example, external stimulation perceived by the dreamer can be incorporated into dreams also, as illustrated by the famous Dali's painting, dream caused by the flight of a bee around the pomegranate a second before waking up. It was one of the few that Dali painted in the United States, where he lived from 1941 to 48. And during this period, the painter was fully occupied placing his artistic genius at the service of the varied demand of the American art trade. He was not painting a lot in these years. And in this picture, hand-painted dream photograph, as Dali generally called his paintings, we find a seascape of distant horizons and calm waters, amidst which Gala, once again, is the subject of the scene, next to the naked body of the sleeping woman, which levitates above a flat rock that floats above the sea. Dali depicts two suspended droplets of water and pomegranate, a Christian symbol of fertility. Above her flies a bee, and insects that traditionally symbolize the Virgin. In Gala's mind, the buzzing of the bee is translated into a dream in which a huge fish bursts out of the pomegranate in the upper part, and in turn spews out 2 tigers and bayonet, as you can see. And now about hypothesis about dream functions. The first hypothesis is that the dream actually has no function. And I could not agree with that, actually. No function. At the end of the 20th century, the neurologist Alan Hobson proposed a theory that deprived dreaming of any function. He says, because dreams are so difficult to remember, it seems unlikely that attention to their content could afford much in the way of high priority survival value. Indeed, it might instead be assumed that dreaming is an epiphenomenon of REM sleep, whose cognitive content is so ambiguous as to invite misleading or even erroneous interpretation. Okay. Another is psychological individualism. Jouvet speculated that dreams could be involved in psychological individualism and in the stability of the dreamer's personality. Jouvet's hypothesis is that paradoxical sleep restores neuronal that was modified during the day to preserve the expression of the genetic program that codes of psychological characteristics. This process would ensure the stability of personality across time. The third one is that the threat simulation theory. The Finnish psychologist Antti Revonsuo proposed a hypothesis called threat simulation theory, which explains the fearful characteristics of dream content as yours. According to this theory, dreams serve as a virtual training places to improve threat avoidance or threat fighting ability. The theory postulates that such nocturnal training makes the dreamer more efficient at resolving threatening situations during wakefulness. Maybe. Another one, emotional regulation. Cartwright's team suggested that dreaming may actively moderate mood overnight in normal subjects. The team strengthened this hypothesis by showing that among subjects who were depressed because of a divorce, those who reported more negative dreams at the beginning of sleep and fewer at the night's end were more likely to be in remission 1 year later than subjects who had fewer negative dreams at the beginning of sleep and more at the end of the night. The researchers concluded that negative dreams early in the night may reflect a within-sleep mood regulation process, whereas those that occur later may indicate a failure in the completion of this process. Another one, memory consolidation. Finally, a current mainstream hypothesis in cognitive neuroscience credits sleep and dreaming with a role in memory consolidation. My case for this presentation. I slept a bit and now maybe I'm more prepared for this. Numerous studies have shown that brain activity during training is replayed during post-training sleep. Only recently, however, experimental results in humans argued in favor of a role of dreaming per se in memory consolidation. In one study, subjects were trained on a virtual navigation task before taking a nap. Post-nap tests showed that subjects who dreamed about the task performed better than subjects who did not dream. And at the end, predicting the future, could we say that dreams have this function, predicting the future? I don't know. We shall see. If you have that dream, you're not alone. 2013 study of undergraduate psychology students in Argentina found that around 1 in 5 of them had a premonitory dream of some kind. These dreams were mostly of trivial events, though some were more serious, and they were often symbolic of the future rather than direct representations. Some people will brush an apparently premonitory dream off as coincidence, and some people will view it as deeply meaningful. So research on belief in the paranormal, including belief in premonitory dreams, shows that there are some personality characteristics that are pretty good predictors of those beliefs. People who believe in psychic ability tend to be more suggestible than others. more likely to make misjudgments about how likely events are, and more likely to find links between distantly related or unrelated things. Maybe we are in this room, that group of people. This kind of link-making tendency is called apophenia, and some studies have found that it is linked with schizotypy. Memory might also play a role. Humans vary in how good their minds are at putting aside information that's no longer relevant. If your mind struggles with this, you might see coincidences where other people don't, eventually becoming more prone than others to believing in paranormal. Okay. According to a review published in 2018, there have been 4 experiments on precognitive dreaming that have done a decent job of preventing research fraud. In each of these, participants were told they'd be seeing an image the next day and were asked to try and dream about what it would be. In the morning, they wrote a report about what they dreamed. After they made the report, the image was selected from a few different possibilities by random number generator. Finally, judges who didn't know which target had been selected saw all the possible targets and made a judgment about which target was most similar to the dream report. 3 of those 4 experiments had results which indicated the dreamers were able to predict the target. If these results are true, it means that there is a direct interaction between each human mind and the rest of the world, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's the way it is. Now I will give 3 historical examples. The first example is from the Serbian IDES Yugoslav history. The day is October the 19th, 1934, assassination of King Alexander of Yugoslavia. As a result of the previous deaths of 3 family members on Tuesdays, Alexander refused to undertake any public functions on the day of the week. On Tuesday, October 9th, 1934, however, he had no choice, as he was arriving in Marseille to start the state visit to France, to strengthen 2 countries' alliance in the Little Entente. While Alexander was being slowly driven in a car through the streets along with French Foreign Minister Louis Berthoud, a gunman stepped from the streets and shot the king twice. Alexander died in the car, slumped backwards in the seat with his eyes open. French Foreign Minister Louis Berthoud was also killed by a stray bullet fired by French police during the scuffle following the attack. It was one of the first assassinations captured on film. The shooting occurred in front of the newsreel cameraman, who was only meters away at the time. While the exact moment of shooting was not captured on film, the events leading to the assassination and the immediate aftermath were. In his memories, Prince Tomislav, King's second son, writes that he had a nightmare in September 1934. One night I woke up crying and screaming. Our governess, Cicero, was created immediately there. Trying to calm me down, she asked me what was wrong with me. What happened? I was just staring out the window. Instead of explaining, I told her, look, that is going to heaven, look. She stroked my hair and asked what I was talking about. Overwhelmed by the image that was so impressive to me, I repeated to her what I saw. And when she, next to me, stared out the window, I added, look, my dad is waving at me. The second example is from the American history. The date is April 14th. The year is 1865. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. He was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while attending the play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Shot in the head as he watched the play, Lincoln died of his wounds the following day. Lincoln's assassination was part of a larger conspiracy intended to revive the Confederate cause by eliminating a few important officials of the federal government. According to Ward Hill Lemon, Lincoln's personal friend and self-appointed bodyguard, 3 days before he was shot, Lincoln related a dream in which he wandered the White House searching for the source of mournful sounds. I kept on until I arrived at East Room, which I entered. There I met with a sickening surprise. Before me was a catafalque on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards. Who is that in the White House? I demanded of one of the soldiers. The president was his answer. He was killed by assassin. However, Lincoln later told Lemon that in this dream, it was not me, but some other fellow. Unfortunately, it was him. And the first historical example, now we are finally in Rome. The date is, as you know, March 15th. The year is 44 BC. And this is assassination of Gaius Julius Caesar. And the picture is by Vincenzo Camuccini. In 44 BC, at the celebration of the Lupercalia, Julius Caesar, seated in the gilded chair at the front of the rostra in the Roman Forum, publicly refused the diadem of kingship presented to him by Mark Antony. He already exercised the power of dictator, and many regarded the gesture as nothing more than pretense. A month later, on the Ides of March, the would-be king was dead. Already there were suspicions of conspiracy, and in retrospect, mere portents. The night before he died, Caesar had dinner with Lepidus. As they drank, the conversation turned to what was the best sort of death for a man. Caesar replied that which was sudden and unexpected. Later that night, his wife Calpurnia dreamed of his body streaming with blood and tried to prevent him from leaving the house. And Caesar also, it would appear, was in some suspicion and fear, for never before had he perceived in Calpurnia any womanish superstition. But now he saw that she was in great distress. The priests too found the omens to be unfavorable. Caesar hesitated, but was persuaded by one of the conspirators that not to attend the Senate would disappoint those who were there already waiting for him and only show his respect. And he went there. Finally, this third example. Now we are in Rome, wandering in ancient Rome, and this is a reconstruction of the Roman Forum done in the course of the Progetto Traiano. Now we are with our Cicero. Looking at the title of this talk, someone might pose the following question. Why should anyone today be concerned with the ideas about dreaming and predicting the future of this Republican thinker, statesman? Does it really matter now what Cicero said about these topics 2 millennia ago? I strongly believe that it does. Not just because we should learn about the history of popular beliefs and superstition in ancient Rome and the broader sense about the Roman mind, but because Cicero's works are worth reading for their own sake. Marcus Tullius Cicero was a Roman statesman, lawyer, scholar, philosopher, whose extensive writings include treatises on rhetoric, philosophy, politics, and who is considered one of Rome's greatest orators and prose stylists. His influence on the Latin language was immense, as you know. He introduced into Latin the arguments of the chief schools of Hellenistic philosophy and created philosophical vocabulary with neologisms such as evidentia, humanitas, qualitas, quantitas, essentia, distinguishing himself as a translator and a philosopher. Petrarch, the rediscovery of Cicero's letters, is often credited for initiating the 14th century Renaissance in public affairs, humanism, and classical Roman culture. The peak of Cicero's authority and prestige came during the 18th century Enlightenment, and his impact on leading figures in Europe and America was substantial. Among Cicero's some other admirers were Erasmus, Luther, Locke, and others. Following the invention of Gutenberg printing press, the Officiis, his philosophical work, was the second book printed in Europe after the Gutenberg Bible. His works rank among the most influential in global culture, and today still constitute one of the most important bodies of primary material for the writing of Roman history and, I think, also Roman thought. Marcus Tullius Cicero was born on the 3rd of January, 106 BC in Arpinum, a hill town 100 kilometers southeast of Rome. He came from a wealthy municipal family of the Roman equestrian order. His father was a well-to-do member of the equestrian order and possessed good connections in Rome. However, he always was a homo novus, and always stayed homo novus. Cicero's cognomen, or personal surname, comes from the Latin for chickpea, Cicer. Plutarch explains that the name was originally given to one of Cicero's ancestors who had the left tip of his nose resembling a chickpea. He writes that Cicero was urged to change this name when he entered politics, but refused, saying that he would make Cicero more glorious than Catulus, which means puppy. Cicero was an extremely talented student whose learning attracted attention from all over Rome, affording him the opportunity to study Roman law under Quintus Mucius Scaevola. In 79 BC, Cicero left for Greece, Asia Minor, and Rhodes. This was perhaps to avoid the potential wrath of Sulla after his successful defense of Sextus Roscius in his speech Pro Rossio Merinum. In the same period, he married his wife Terentia. As Plutarch says, Terentia was a strong-willed woman, and she took more interest in his husband's political career than she allowed him to take in household affairs. It was a marriage of convenience, but lasted harmoniously for nearly 30 years. In the 50s, Cicero's letters to Terentia became shorter and colder, and at the end they divorced in 46 or 45. Cicero and Terentia had 2 children, Cicero's beloved daughter Tullia and son Marcus. Cicero successfully ascended the cursus honorum, holding each magistracy at or near the youngest possible age, as you can see on the slide. Quaestor in 75, Aedile in 69, Praetor in 66, and finally then elected consul for the year 63 at the age of 42. It was during Cicero's consulship that the Catilian conspiracy attempted to overthrow the government through an attack on the city by outside forces, and Cicero suppressed the revolt by controversially executing 5 conspirators without trial. Catilians, shaken by Cicero's attack in the Senate, fled Rome on the night between 8th and 9th November 63 BC. When several days later the decision to execute Catilian supporters was finally made, Cicero was given the honorable agnomen Pater Patriae. However, Cicero was soon to be forced into exile. Although Cicero returned from exile after a year and a half, he never managed to regain his previous reputation. Now, maybe to say a little bit more about his banishment, because it will be important later. Roman political life in the last century of the Republic and the early empire was by definition centered in the capital, and mere removal from the hub of political activity would reduce an exiled politician's power to virtually nothing. Their physical presence was required if politicians wished to stand for office or have any influence in the politics. That this is not surprising that in the Roman world, exile and death were closely related, because exile frequently served as preemption of substitute for the death penalty. It was often portrayed in literature as a virtual equivalent of death. Few displacements have been so consistently and self-revealingly documented by the exile himself as Cicero's experience of banishment in the years 58-57. At different stages, he utilized virtually all the generic forms for which he had that become famous to document one or another aspect of his troubles. The details of Cicero's exile are clear enough, but his attitude to this momentous event is complex. An unauthorized but true version of Cicero's exilic autobiography is reflected in the letters from exile written to his best friend Atticus. Later, returned exile propaganda of his own was a little bit made with colors of heroic hindsight. In 49, Caesar crossed the Rubicon and Cicero sided with Pompey, after whose defeat he was pardoned by Caesar. Following Caesar's death in 44, Cicero sided with Octavian against Mark Antony, attacking him in a series of speeches. But the two politicians found an agreement, which included getting rid of their respective enemies. Cicero was proscribed as an enemy of the state by the Second Triumvirate and consequently executed by soldiers in 43. Now, a little bit about Cicero as a philosopher. One of the charges that have most frequently been leveled at Cicero by contemporary readers is a supposed inability to work out an authentically original set of philosophical views. In the opinion of many commentators, his theoretical style and students he displayed in his political and forensic activity are not matched by equally remarkable achievements in the domain of theoretical reflection. Such a conviction might be fostered by a number of factors. In the first place, Cicero himself declared that there are many to whom he yields precedence of knowledge of philosophy, and that he could rather lay claim to the orator's peculiar set of abilities. Also, his frequent explicit reminders to the doctrines of thinkers like Plato, Aristotle, and skeptics and Stoics in his written works, he often led scholars to charge him of mindless eclecticism. Most notably, his political views have often been judged in terms of simple projection of his life and active commitments in the turbulent period of factional strife preceding the death of the Roman Republic, and not as senses obsession by authentic philosophical outlook. Cicero's voluminous corpus of writings allow the reader to trace the seeds of an authentically pioneering political theory, one that might give us insights into a network of key philosophical questions to which he seems to give pride of place: justice, justitia, equity, equitas, the nature of the res publica, and its most desirable internal arrangement, the best regime, the role of natural law and the individual virtues in shaping the moral texture of the members of the societas humana. Cicero's philosophical examination of the nature and purpose of politics is the result of a complex personal and professional path, which combines his dedication to literary and philosophical studies with his military, legal, and political engagements. Now, a little bit about Cicero's De Divinatione. This work is often neglected, having the reputation of being the least philosophical of all Cicero's philosophical dialogues, despite its significance for the history and philosophy of science. Traditionally, it was portrayed of Cicero's attack on Roman religion. We shall see if it is so. But more recent scholarship has questioned this view. The Divinatione is divided into two books. In the first book, the author's brother Quintus tries to establish some arguments for divination, mostly appealing to examples of divination from Greek and Roman history. In the second book, Marcus, the author himself, or rather the character in the dialogue, attempts to undermine his brother's arguments. These beautiful pictures of the old edition of the Divinatione, and this is from the year 1590. It is in our library at the Department of Classics here in Belgrade. And I will want to thank our librarian Vedrana because she was so kind to provide me with this photograph. Cicero's De Divinatione begins like this. There is an ancient belief handed down to us even from mythical times and firmly established by general agreement of the Roman people and of all nations, that divination of some kind exists among men. This Greek called mantike, that is, the foresight and knowledge of future events. A really splendid and helpful thing it is, if only such a faculty exists, since by its means man may approach very near to the power of gods. Because of this sentence, if only such a faculty exists, because of that, and many others, scientists are accusing Cicero of being atheist and so on and so on. Now, Cicero has to say something about precognitive dreams. But let us leave oracles, because oracles were earlier in this work, and come to dreams. In his treatise on this subject, Chrysippus, just as Antipater does, has assembled a mass of trivial dreams, which he explains according to Antiphon's rules of interpretation. The work, I admit, displays the acumen of its author, but it would have been better if he had cited illustrations of a more serious type. Now Philistus, who was a learned and painstaking man and contemporary of the times of which he writes, gave us the following story of the mother of Dionysius, the tyrant of Syracuse. While she was with child and was carrying this same Dionysius in her womb, she dreamed that she had been delivered of an infant satyr. When she referred this dream to the interpreters of the two interpreters of portents, who in Sicily were called Galeotai, they replied, so Philistus relates, that she would bring forth a son who would be very eminent in Greece and would enjoy a long and prosperous career. Now, when I was a student at this faculty, I didn't like poetry, I must confess, and now I will give you some poetry because Cicero is giving to us some poetry. After this, Cicero refers to a few examples from the Greek mythology and then to the Roman legendary past, citing the verses from the drama of Accius Brutus. In those verses, the last king of the Romans, Tarquin the Proud, talks about his dream in which he was killed. Maybe it is better to see the English translation. At night's approach, I sought my quiet couch, to soothe my weary limbs with restful sleep. Then in my dreams, a shepherd near me drove, I a fleece hard whose beauty was extreme. I chose 2 broad rams from out the flock, and sacrificed the cormelia of the twain, and then, with lowered horns, the other ram attacked and bore me headlong to the ground. Now observe how the diviners interpreted the dream. It is not strange, O king, that the dreams reflect the day's desires and thoughts, its sights and deeds, and everything we say or do awake. But in so grave a dream as yours, we see a message clearly sent, and thus it warns, beware of him you deem bereft of wit, and rate no higher than a stupid ram, lest he, with wisdom armed, should rise to fame and drive you from your throne, the sun's changed course. And now I will be silent and I will give you 2 tasks. You have on this handout those lines, those verses, and the most important are, of course, how the diviners interpreted this dream. And I underlined the most important verses on the slide. And you have 2 tasks, if you see. Take a look at diviner's interpretation, Tarquin's dream, and think about which phenomenological characteristics of dream content found in experimental research on dreaming they could be related to. I will help you, of course. First desk task. Okay. Who is willing to say something about this? This? Yeah.
Well, there's at least the dream itself in the first-person perspective. He's dreaming about a shepherd and near me drove a fleecy where his beauty was extreme, etc. So the dreamer himself experiencing it from a first-person perspective. And also, once again, so the visual imagery occurs more frequently than the imagery of other senses. He's just talking about what he sees.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But also these lines, then in my dreams the shepherd near me drove a fleecy herd whose beauty was extreme. Also, it is not within his voluntary control. It's something that happens. Yeah.
I thought the last 3 lines of the poem actually are quite a telling example of the threat aversion hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, but you are now doing the second task. Thank you. Yes. Now, second task. Second task is to try to relate these verses to hypotheses about dream functions in experimental psychology, and these are, again, these theories. Okay? Now,
Well, I really like how the diviners are not simplifying dreams. Actually, on my first reading, I thought that they are not trying to find a single essential function of the dream, but they say that they obviously can reflect everyday experiences, or let's say they can consolidate memory and that kind of stuff, maybe bring out some meaning we didn't see, but also they can have a more deeper, let's say, meaning, and this is the second part of the paragraph. Yeah, so
maybe prediction of the future, because in the last couple of verses it's like it suggests what will happen and that he should avoid these threats. And
Yeah, thank you.
And to me it seems all of the above. The priests say that sometimes dreams have no function, and then that there is also emotional regulation, memory consolidation. For example, in the verse, the dreams reflect the day's desires and thoughts, its sights and deeds, and everything we say or do awake. And also predicting the future and
So all functions.
all of the above, yeah.
Curious thing is that they do not say, but there are technical treatises where there are distinguishes made how we can recognize which dream is prophetic and which is not. There is the whole onirocritic thing. And here they do not say, probably because this is a, I don't know, artistic representation, and they do not deal with details. But it is curious to see that not every dream was prophetic, even for diviners. And there are some dreams who could be random, trivial, or whatever.
Thank you very much. Yeah. When I read for the first time these lines, I couldn't believe, actually. Because, as you all said, we have almost all functions, and almost all content that psychologists are now talking about. So, at the end, what we have done in 2 millennia or so, and two and a half millennia, because it's Tarquin the Proud. So yeah, I was stuck with this. After this dream, Cicero is giving us two dreams. First, the dream of his brother Quintus, who is arguing that divination is real, that divination exists, and this is the text which talk about Quintus' dream. But why go on seeking illustrations from ancient history? I had a dream which I have often related to you, and you one which you have often told to me. When I was governor of Asia, so Quintus, again, this is Cicero's brother, I dreamed that I saw you on horseback riding toward the bank of some large river, when you suddenly plunged forward, fell into the stream, and wholly disappeared from sight. I was greatly alarmed and trembled with fear. But in a moment you reappeared, mounted on the same horse, and with a cheerful countenance ascended the opposite bank, where we met and embraced each other. The meaning of the dream was readily explained to me by experts in Asia, who from it predicted those events which subsequently occurred. Those events are Cicero's banishment and again his backing to Rome. And another dream, Cicero's dream now. I come now to your dream. I heard it, of course, from you, but more frequently from our Sallustius. In the course of your banishment, which was glorious for us but distressful to the state, you stopped for the night at a certain country house in the plain of Athena. It's not Athens, it's Athena in Latium. After lying awake most of the night, finally about daybreak, you fell into a very profound sleep. And though your journey was pressing, yet Sallustius gave instructions to maintain quiet and would not permit you to be disturbed. But you woke about the second hour, it's dawn, and related your dream to him. In it, you seem to be wandering sadly about in solitary places when Gaius Marius, with his fastest rafting laurel, asked you why you were sad, and you replied that you had been driven from your country by violence. He then bade you be of good cheer, took you by the right hand, and delivered you to the nearest lictor to be conducted to his memorial temple, saying that there you should find safety. Seleucus thereupon, as he relates, cried out, "A speedy and glorious return awaits you." He further states that you two seemed delighted at the dream. Immediately thereafter, it was reported to me that as soon as you heard that it was in Marius' temple that the glorious decree of the Senate for your recall had been enacted on motion of the council, a most worthy and most eminent man, and the decree had been greeted by unprecedented shouts of approval and crowded theater, you said that no stronger proof could be given of a divinely inspired dream than this. Now, do you see what is striking, what is strange? So we have two brothers, Cicero, our Cicero, Marcus Tullius Cicero, and his brother Quintus Tullius Cicero. Traditionally, Alto's brother Quintus establishes some arguments for divination, and Marcus Tullius, the author, against divination. And now, in the first book, we see that Quintus is reporting that Cicero had a premonitory dream in which he believed. So I think these are many, many instances in this work which could be in our argumentation that Cicero is not meaning those words that he is going to say. So these are characters, not real men. So, and their function is to have an argument and dialogue, not to say his own feelings and his own argumentation. So this dream is also important for this point. And at the end, this is monument in Formia, traditionally identified as the tomb of Cicero, along the Via Appia, and of course it's not tomb of Cicero, but this is a mausoleum from the Augustan age. And that's it. That's all, folks.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to address a couple of things which will also be a little throwback to some of the yesterday's lectures, but I will try to be brief as possible, but this is something that at this point somehow I managed to gather my thoughts around several things said within these 2 days of the workshop. So this analysis of the dreams and putting an emphasis on a dream as an epistemological faculty, we could say, along with some other things that were said these days, reminded me also of the, I will also remind and maybe inform other participants about the one British, well, we can say occult author, artist, philosopher from the 20th century. His name was Austin Osman Spare. He was, as far as I know, the youngest exhibitionist in the Royal Academy of Art with his artistic work. Why am I speaking of him? He was, in some of his works, practicing something both in written and painted works, something that can be that is named and according to its method, the automatic writing or automatic painting. So also, setting aside to a certain extent these intellectual faculties, this hyper-consciousness that we are generally involved with when we are dealing with something scientifically in its standard method, in order to let the possibility of expression of something else, of some other forms of expression that might tell us something different from the way that we are usually thinking. The way that we are usually thinking, and I think also before I continue on this point, I would also like to say something regarding the petitionary prayer. The same man, the Austin Osman Spare, had something to say about the magic. He was connecting magic to the science, actually, because the science was as a new method of magic for him. That is something that differs quite from what Weber would say, that we are in this enchanted world, because, okay, the goals are the same, just the methods are different, but they are very different from petitioner prayer.
You mean Francis Bacon, right? Or did you mention that he meant that magic is... No, okay. Because I thought you said that, and I'm thinking... just one quick note. Francis Bacon thought about metaphysics as... when you apply metaphysics, you get natural magic. Yes. And he used that word, natural magic. So that's interesting. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and also the hidden process of Francis Bacon that he perceived in nature to some extent. Austin Spare had this definition of magic, which I find quite interesting. He said, it is the ability to attract without asking. This is something in contrast to petitionary prayer. But what I wanted to say is where all these things differ from the general standard scientific point of view method regular in something that we philosophically call discourse. So we have this discourse on how to think about things, how to talk about things, how to analyze them, and this is all very how to dream. Yeah, how to interpret the world around us. What I find common in theurgy, in the analysis of dreams, in the analysis of the yesterday's Professor Akkad lecture also, is this idea that we should also understand what is possible, not just what the mere state of the current events are in the world that we observed, which is something that I wouldn't say all science, but crude science, maybe science of certain age or science of certain intentions, has is prone to do with the world, like taking the certain set of events. I also have to mention Spinoza, of course, here, who was very critical about the empiricist of his age, because what his point of view was that they're just explaining a certain set of conditions, do not explain all possibilities of causa efficiens. So, what is in causa efficiens is the power of the certain instance, certain agency. And back to your lecture. Now, as I said, I wanted to gather my thoughts around several things in this respect regarding the scientific discourse. Back to your lecture, I think that we could also approach some of the understanding of the dreams from the epistemological theory of probability. You have set your lecture within the ancient Roman period, and I'm very glad for that. And these other examples of assassinations and dreams about this jeopardy remind me of something else also that we had in the ancient Roman times. We had something that was called Sword of Damocles and memento mori, the ritual that while after the triumph there would always be the slave behind the emperor, king, whoever achieved this triumph, who would whisper to him memento mori, because now you are in the position of a jeopardy, of an ultimate power, but jeopardy because someone else also wants that power. So I think that this thought is something that occupied these people a lot. Also, okay, maybe it's not the best way to approach subjects if we want to give it some academic or scientific point of view, the personal point of view, but there's something also that I can add to this from my own perspective. If I have certain problem, if I expect something, if I'm very much involved into thinking about solving something in my wake state, that's usually something that I will also be dreaming about. But as I said, I understand this from the point of view that if we leave this hyperconscious or conscious state, there is something also on the subconscious or unconscious state that might be, let's say, unlocked within these different practices, theurgical rituals, dreaming, automatic writing, automatic whatever. So also Spare, whom I mentioned, I think that he had a few of his works had something, I would say, Jungian to it, like this protozoa, where he had like shapes and forms from different forms of life, lower, let's say, from the plants to different animals, and then transcending to a human being. So this is something that I see that might be in it. So this was a broad comment, not a certain question, but I think there are several questions. If you maybe want to comment back on that.
Yes, I would like to say something about dreaming when we are talking about animals. Anyone who has a pet knows that pets, cats and dogs are dreaming also. So this is not just human condition, just that, but not to go any further. Yeah.
I would also like to add something that, in addition to contemporary neuroscience, which the theories of which you expounded, traditionally, as you all know, dreams and the interpretation thereof formed a large part of modern psychology in the works of Freud, which is actually that is something which is more or less interpretation of symbols. The things which are represented in a dream are symbols that stand for something else, and there is a peculiar way of the working of symbolic thinking about this, which actually brings modern psychoanalysis back to the ancient oneirocritics, because for ancient oneirocritic, these were all symbols which work in a kind of metaphorical way, depending on who you are, what is the moment that moment in your life when you take your dream. So probably in the development of interpretation of symbolic thinking, dreams also have a big role, and maybe this is what the diviners in the play say. Okay, on many occasions, dreams don't mean anything, but in this particular occasion, you seeing this particular thing can be symbolically interpreted as
that you are in danger.
Else.
You are in danger.
Yes,
you are in danger.
And this is what actually surrealism also counted a lot.
Yes.
About the picture of Dali that you showed contains no random symbols. It could be purely automatic, the automatic writing in the automatic painting. What will pop up of your subconscious, which could be random, but in other cases, such as in the works of Dali, of De Chirico, it is not random at all. It is very, very thought.
Freud had influence on Dali.
Yes.
We know that.
I want to thank you for a wonderful lecture. I really enjoyed it. It was informative. I didn't know anything about it. Cicero's thoughts on dreams, whether he believed in their power to predict or not. It doesn't matter. But still,
I think he did.
But to tie this discussion to what we heard, to what I know, no, I'm joking, but to what we talked about yesterday, and this modern versus pre-modern world. Now, there were lots of debates about. Within Christian circles later on, whether there is any way for us to predict. Divination was kind of superstition. We don't want to deal with that. It's asking to know what we are not meant to know, so to know future. It's against God's will to know that. But the thing is that again, they, all of them, pagans or Christians or people in between, they all lived in a world where the world and objects, events, phenomena in the world were understood in a way that we somehow matter to them. So when you see that, when you hear the thunder, you wonder what it means to you. So it's not some neutral event indifferent to you and the other people. You're searching for the meaning behind these natural events. So no wonder that people searched for the meaning behind dreams. I mean, they are in the first, as you said, the first person. They are vivid occasionally. They seem to tell you something. So that's one thing. Now, in our modern world, where I spoke about that yesterday, the world is indifferent to us, and so, but we still cannot escape the feeling that the dreams are telling us something. So we cannot really live entirely in the world thinking that it's completely neutral to us, that it doesn't have any intentions toward us, that the dreams are purely physiological phenomena. Yeah, just like nothing. Like it's just no function whatsoever. So it's very hard to live in the world where you don't really ask for your place in it. So these are just some comments that your talk triggered. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I just have a question that is really adjacent to this comment. I wanted to ask if you have any thoughts on the connection between this function of prediction and the fact that these predicting dreams are always of something existential that is really of existential relevance. We don't really predict something in a statistical way in a dream, that we don't have these objective predictions of and just any, let's say, neutral natural event. It's always something that concerns us even intimately. So an event that is about our father, mother, all of these examples that even historical examples that you mentioned are always of existential relevance. So do you have any kind of thoughts about this connection between? So it's always a value-laden prediction in dreams.
It has to be relevant. If it is not relevant, we will not remember it. I think it's my. Yeah.
Microphone, I guess. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Really interesting talk, and those passages with Cicero. I need to go back, and I'd like to go back through those. It's been like undergrad, I think, when I read some of those. Yeah. No, it's fine. Just general, but just a couple general thoughts. I don't really work on I don't work specifically on texts on theurgy or dreams and Neoplatonists, but in general terms, I can say. I mean, of course, they would probably approach it very differently from Cicero, where they would say, actually, yeah, the symbols and dreams can tell you something. But maybe in the backgrounds, I mean, it's maybe just by way of juxtaposition, if you're looking at late antique Neoplatonists, like in terms of like some people earlier talking about symbols and dreams where they may stand out for signifying certain things outside of just the general phenomenological content. Could be one thing in the background, I mean, just kind of by way of comparison, but so Proclus, for example, so like in the 5th century, Neoplatonists, like one thing he deals with when dealing with the interpretation of Homer and Plato is, well, Plato, most people know Plato, he derides poets in general, derides Homer and the Republic, and then at the same time he will often use Homer very positively as part of his philosophy. Proclus, I mean, I think it kind of has an interesting interpretation or take on Homer, where like the poets, where like the contents that they have, it's very strange if you're looking at it in terms of like upright morals and so on, where a very basic interpretation would make you think, well, this is just a bunch of like very base interpretation of the gods, if they're supposed to have these like higher features transcending like earthly bodies, for example, having human like attitudes, they should transcend those. So Proclus will take those things as symbols for like, they're supposed to represent something higher, but until you've been illumined, like if you're directly connected or your intellect has been raised up to the level of the gods, or at least you're like participating at that higher level, you're not going to understand those symbols at all. And so he basically gives that as his like interpretation of Plato's banning of reading the poets for the lower level, at least in the Republic city, because most people haven't been raised or trained up to that higher level. So which is all to say that the use of symbols, at least the idea of symbol or symbology in these Neoplatonist texts, especially with dreams, but also in like theurgical rites, they tend to take that in terms of kind of a higher knowledge that transcends just a pure intellectual and therefore a pure just kind of phenomenological kind of analysis. So they would take that in terms of like basically divine providence, but that would be a kind of higher knowledge above just a pure intellectual level, like thinking in terms of universals and particulars, regenerate species, that kind of general, you could say, normative kind of analysis. But they also recognize, at least I think they would recognize that it's like usually the common content of dreams, but then the symbols that you'll see in dreams, it would take a diviner who's united to the gods to recognize those features in the background. So they would actually recognize or acknowledge, okay, maybe there's something to the diviner actually telling you these, interpretation of these dreams. I wish I could point out specific texts to you right now, but I can't think of them. So, but I can. It's not something to mention.
We believe you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to add something. I didn't have enough time to broader analysis of this wonderful piece of Cicero's art. But he is also talking about Plato in this work, and he's citing Plato actually. He's citing Plato, and he said that Plato said that it is really important in what condition you are going to bed, to sleep. If you were very tired, if you drank a lot or something, you are in that position that you could have very bad dreams. I think you know that place from Plato. So it could happen that you dream that you have a course with your mother. So that was inspiration for Freud, actually, and we know that Plato was inspiration for Freud. And some people, some scientists are talking about Freud as a plagiator of Plato. So the picture is broader, but I didn't have enough time for all this.
Concerning the intercourse with your mother, I think Cyrus the Great or somebody like that had a dream like this, which was symbolically interpreted that he will conquer the world. And in connection with what has been said in the discussion, the symbolic interpretation versus taking dreams as something random or a psychological internal interpretation. Maybe it is not symbolic thinking is not just about dreams, as Professor Denovic said. If we live in a world which we believe is the phenomenal expression of something that stands behind it, then we tend to interpret things symbolically. If nothing stands metaphysically behind the world that we see, maybe we either turn the interpretation inwards, or maybe it's me, maybe it's something that I have, or we just leave it without interpretation. Maybe this is the big difference between pre-modern and modern and postmodern thinking about dreams and about anything else for that matter. What does thunderstorm mean?